So we'll start again with our third and last panel today, Sonic Cyborgs. And we have 4 speakers, which we'll share with us, and then we'll have a discussion in the end. And our first speaker is Constanza Piña Pardo with the Khipu project. And Constanza is a visual art dancer and researcher focused on electronic experimentation, open technologies, and social practices. Her work reflects the role of machines in culture, criticizing capitalism, colonialism, and techno-patriarchy systems. She's interested in recycling, handicrafts, and electronic wizardry, and her work reflects the role of machines in our culture. She embodies the philosophy of open culture, nomadism, techno-feminism, and electronic anarchy. And she's also the founder of Cyborgs, yeah, techno-feminist meeting in Mexico City. And her work has been part of international festivals and spaces. A lot of them, just some of them are the Ars Electronica, the Media Lab Pardo, the Media Lab in Mexico, Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, and Lab Kilab in Taiwan. So Constanza, we're very happy to have you with us, and I will give the floor straight over to you.
Hello. Thank you, everybody, to be here, and thank you, Art Laboratory Berlin. Today, I am going to talk about research that I started in 2013 when I was first time here in Berlin. I know about Khipu for first time. This is a system that was used in, during the Inca Empire and all the pre-Columbian cultures in South America. And I don't know about that system before because the most of the Khipus are out of the origin, the territory. And the biggest collection of them is here in Berlin in Ethnological Museum. Now I am going to start to talk about Khipus. Khipus are books not written on papers or mnemotechnic systems or information storage devices. And also we can define them as ancient computers, no? Bueno, sí. And also for pre-Columbian culture, not represent a social commitment or social pact, no? For all society, all the society. Here we can see pictures from some Khipus. We can see spaces in between of the strings and also different shape of knots. And also this is another kind of Khipu before the Inca Empire. This is the Wari culture. It's different because it has an arc and also thread around the strings and different colors. And also Khipus are related to another system called Yupana. We can see in that corner these squares with black and white circles. Oh, but it's not here. Right. Sorry. I lose a page. But now, bueno, la Yupana is a mathematical system for complex additions or, ¿cómo se dice? Olvidé la palabra. It's for mathematics, no? Count and so now the characteristics and structures of Khipus is it has a main rope or an arc that we can see in the picture before, and also the main rope has a big knot in the end. Maybe it means how is that Khipu about, no? and also hanging strings, and sometimes most strings hanging from that strings, and also different knots, long knot, different shape as an 8 shape knot, or no, any knot means 0, number 0. And also it depends of the position of the knot in the strings, represent unit, 10, 100, thousands, or more than 1,000. And also spaces in between of the ropes, and also the material or the color of the strings, numeric, they can have numerical or narrative information like stories or numbers about how many people is in some area or animals, or, and also there are another kind of quipus, anormalous, no? Como like different, we don't know what they say. And for my research, I keep my attention in astronomical quipus because they are like oracles of the time. And now we can see a picture about these descriptions, the pendal chords, and also subsidiary chords, and also some chords are hanging to up or down, and different notes. And we can think about quipus as computers, and with 7 bits. No? So we have different levels in binary codification. For example, the material, if is cotton or wool or color class. This is about in Quechua culture, they separate the colors as if some colors are mixed with violet, are from dark rainbow colors, no? Or if the colors have yellow, it's another kind of rainbow, no? Also depend of twisted, the strings, or the direction of the knot, if it's due to right or left. And also numerical class. This is related to even number or odd number. And also the type of information is codified in the Khipu if they use decimal or not decimal numbers. Now we can see some images about that information before. And now I am going to talk about some contemporary references around quipus, because when I start my research, I was thinking in the idea, what if the colonizer never arrived in Latin America and the quipus or our old technology, pre-Columbian technology still exists, no? So me and other artists also, we are in connection in South America. We talk about Latin America science fiction, no? Or and Andean futurism. No? So I like this concept about, it's from Jose Luis Jacome Guerrero and Noé Mayorga from Ecuador, that they talk about kipunk. This is a concept like steampunk, and it's a retrofuturist philosophy and art, which based in perception on speculative science fiction and Andean cosmovivencia, mixed with the aesthetic of a steampunk. No? And they talk about the technologies in Abyayala. No? Abyayala is the name of all Latin America. And they suggest quipus as technologies, as punk aspect, and also steam as the energy. No? because for us, our goddess, main goddess during the Inca Empire and in all South America is Viracocha. Is the material of Viracocha is steam, no? So it's like an energy, a spiritual energy in life, no? Jose Luis is like a messenger from the past, and he's giving a Khipu with a message, no, for the future. And this is another artist, is Patricia Cadavid from Colombia, that she developed an electronic Khipu using conductive materials, and she played with this interface, sorry. And she's talking about another concept called Khipu Naira, because for the pre-Columbian cultures, the past is in front of us, no? Because we can see our past and the future is behind. So as I said, she's talking about Khipu Naira, Khipu of the future time, no? But with an eye in the past, no? In front. And also another artist is Paula Torres. She's using Khipus in different ways. Also, she played with Khipus, and she talked about Khipumancia, like a divinatory technique using Khipus, you know? So I like to think in this a speculative way about Khipus, because we have this uncertainty of our past, no? So if we take this speculative narrative speculativas, we can bring our culture today, no? So another curious thing is some chronists write that write letters and some type of escritura, exist on the Inca Empire, but they prohibit and only limit the communication to geometrical shapes and also Khipus. And also I want to talk about El Manifiesto Futurista Andino de Alan Poma, that he said between the observation of the movement of the stars and constellation make them away the circle of nature, developing the ability to predict astronomical phenomena. And for that, to celebrate this discovery, architects, astronomers, engineers, and artists, developing the unique temples that were strategical places to coincide with the star phenomena, no? So we are talking about an old society where the wearables, elements, urbanism, architecture, temples, and are in the same way to read the future and the stars, and also it's a mathematical system, a cosmovision, no? In the whole continent. So for that, in this manifesto, we can think about a region full of past is also full of possible futures. So now, in my research also, I think about how is the computer science today in relation with textiles And also astronomy is related with computers, no, today. So this is, for me, is a good reference because the women Harvard computers are women that they create the system to classify stars. And in that moment in Harvard, there are no computers, but they are the computer, no? And also Ada Lovelace is the first person in the world, it's not the first woman, it's the first person that she developed a code. And she developed this code thinking in this machine is a loom machine, also for textiles, no? And this machine used this punched card. ¿Cómo se dice? Sí, eso. And from this code and using the reference of the loom machine, that is the first computer, no? It's the first computer is take that references to exist, no? So for that, I like to think all our computers that we use today are created taking textiles as references. Also, women works, no? And also I like this reference because it's the Little Old Ladies Memories. They are a group of women that they made the ROM memories for Apollo mission. And it's really like a textile. And they changed the name, like not ROM memories as LOL memories, because it's the work of them, no? So now I am showing some pictures about my installation. This research has a laboratory that I teach. I share my research with others, with a group of women called Melissa Aguilar, Daniela Sofia Main, Ana Ortiz, Ana Cervantes, and me. So the idea was to create a Khipu because we're reading a book. If you really want to understand a Khipu, you have to do one with your hands, no? Because at the time, as this performance that when you do count with your finger and your brain, you are part of the computer, no? Your body is part of the computer, and if you do that as a mantra, you can really understand what Khipu is. For that, I like that reference of women computers because they are the computer. Your body, your time, and your brain is part of the computer. So we do that exercise and we take the classification system of the star of the Harvard computers is this, is with letters, and we use that letter as an ASCII code, and we mix with a decimal system and also a binary system to understand Khipu not today and to classify information in our own Khipu. So for that, we have to create a new algorithm and codification, taking information from different sources, no? So also I create some electronic circuits, DIY. They are some electromagnetic fields amplifier. So we was creating an astronomical Khipu. And that constellation is, the name is Botes. that was the constellation, what we have over us during the laboratory when we developed the Khipu. So we think to keep that information in our Khipu. So just we write on the Khipu, we codify. Today, me, Constanza, I am under this star here. No? Is that the information that we codify in our Khipu? So this is the constellation, and I create a DIY circuit taking this shape, and this is my PCB, my circuit board. And then this is the installation is 180 strings mixed with alpaca wool and conductive thread, copper thread. So every string is connected with this circuit board. And behind of the circuit board is an electromagnetic field amplifier. And then I need a sound system. So the idea with this installation is to do like a big antenna with conductive thread and then amplify the sound, the electromagnetic field surround the installation. The idea was because Khipu means knot, and also means like talking knot, no? Because today we cannot read how is written or codified on Khipus. But for me, it was important to be in a sensible space with the Khipu and the person, and we can do some sensible experience and talk with our Khipu. No? So this is picture of the first installation. And the people can walk around. And then the Khipu was in Ars Electronica, has already mentioned. And for me, I am super proud because this is a group of women that we do a ritual in Mexico to celebrate this because it's, for me, super important Latin American women representation in that kind of festivals. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So we're going to continue with the thoughts and then bring everyone up in the end for your questions. So our next speaker is Nayeli Vega, and everything okay? Nayeli is a Mexican artist and designer based and working in Berlin. And her work focuses on topics related to feminism, ecology, social justice, and speculative design. Her artistic practice explores rituals and technologies of the past, present, and future through digital and analog mediums, such as digital 3D modeling and fabrication, weaving, knots, installations, amongst others. She's been awarded the Elsa Neumann Scholarship of the Berlin Senate, and she's co-founder and member of the Lacuna Lab e.V., an international artist collective in Berlin-Kreuzberg that brings together a wide range of projects on the intersection of art and technology. And seeing each other after 8 years, we realized that Nayeli actually took a class with Florian and I a decade ago. So we're very excited to see what you're working on now. Welcome, Nayeli.
Thank you so much. It is a delight for me to participate in this event, especially after listening to Constanza. It is just, yeah, so it is just, for me, super incredible. I'm going to talk to you about my journey with this project, which is happening in Europe. So I am a non-European designer, and which is an important fact when I am working with this project. So Codes in Knots, it is a project investigating the relation of pre-colonial textile-based information technology and modern-day digital design. based on the observation that in many pre-colonial cultures, textiles have been used to store and transmit data and information. The project aims at the transfer of such technologies into the digital age by creating connections between pre-colonial and modern day knowledge systems. And with this project, I explored the functionality of the Khipus. I want to also say that with this project, I want to promote the decolonial and a feminist perspective on the field of design, which I consider that needs to be changed from the structures. So I will start saying that this quote from Matteo Paschinelli, claiming that abstract techniques of knowledge and artificial meta-languages belong uniquely to the modern industrial West, is not only historically inaccurate, but also act as one of the implicit epistemic colonialism towards cultures of other places and other times. This quote also motivated me a lot to understand what is communication and what is language. When I was making my, this is part of my initial research for my master thesis. I am trained as a textile designer. I wanted to know more about, specifically about how textiles have been used through history to transmit information, either quantitative or qualitative. So, because I made a research on Khipus, and I consider that I will focus right now in this part of the Khipu, which is the knot, which was something that I became very interested because I started to read about knots and knotting techniques, which were using a long history by many cultures, and it's one of the oldest techniques to attach objects. I'm going to quote Semper, an architect, that said, it's one of the oldest techniques for attaching objects to another, one to another, and constructing more complex structures out of single entities. The knotting of linear fibers is considered to be historical starting point of textile techniques and architecture. Besides their material function as structuring elements, knots can also contain a strong symbolism. Such symbolism can be abstract when, for example, when using the term knots and knotting as metaphors for the connectivity and interrelatedness of the social and natural world, but also very concrete, as in the case of textile devices, using knots as a form of code for the purposes of encrypting data and information. With the Khipu, as we saw in the previous presentation, the Andean people developed knotted cords to record information. Such uses of knotted cords as information carriers has been a common practice among pre-Columbian societies and still prevail after the colonial period. In my research, I found other examples. For example, the so-called time ball, which is a knotted device used by the women of the North American Yakama tribe to describe important life events of their family members, as well as the string figure games used to preserve and tell the stories of the Navajo people. And in fact, according to the researcher Frank Salomon, that many indigenous people of the Americas use knotted techniques to materialize narratives about their perception of the world and the cosmos. And actually, I just learned that, for example, string games were also, or are still used by, in Australia, by indigenous Aboriginal people in Australia. So in my research on the Khipus, I chose to work, I was making a research on how they were working, and I found out that there are 3 main knots in the Khipus. This is a diagram taken from Asher and Asher. And then I started, as Constanza said, it's necessary to start knotting and recreate these knots to understand how they work. In my research becomes very fictional in the way I started to think how to create messages, how to encode stories, for example. And I started to think how to work with digital technologies because I wanted to understand how co-create with the machines, for example. With this, in these images, you can see it's my first attempt of materialize knotting technique. And here you can see it contains the single knot and other knots that then I made with the computer, and then I 3D printed. With this project, I analyzed Khipu's physical properties from a design perspective to then present a framework to encode narratives into three-dimensional surfaces using digital media and additive manufacturing. This attempt is rooted in three critical perspectives on design that form the project's analytical framework and can be described as the colonial, feminist, and also personal. The colonial perspective refers from the notion that history and historical artifacts from any kind of materials have for many years been predominantly interpreted from a colonizer perspective that tend to neglect other languages, cultures, and knowledge systems. So, well, also, I want to point out that knowledge and about digital technologies can also exist out of the structural power relations that foster an unequal distribution of the means to influence and control technological development. Understanding that these relations are heavily organized around gender and gender stereotypes, this work as well takes a feminist perspective. So on my analysis of the Khipus, I was following the research from Gary Orton, saying mostly taking like what are the material properties that would be important to consider when trying to interpret the Khipus. For example, the material, the color of the cords, the spin, the ply, the direction of the knots, the positioning of cords, the type of knot, the thread color and color lengths, and there are more. But then I take, for my purpose of my project, I take physical and digital properties for my project, which is the material. And this, in this stage of my project, I chose to work with the material, with the color, with the knot type, with the knot direction, with the texture, and with the elasticity. These are some diagrams also following the research from Gary Orton and other researchers about the notation, the numerical notations into the knots. The X represents empty spaces, the X is the 1, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, until 9. And then I started to create my diagrams on how to create other kind of knots, which, for example, I am making the diagram of the knot number 9 and how to start creating other shapes. And here, I am going to talk specifically about the knots. Knotting is defined as a method of fastening linear material by tying or interweaving, whereas I'm going to explain what happened here. So I selected these 3 main knots in the Khipu, which is the single knot, the figure 8 knot, and the long knot, and then started to create equivalences when closing the knots and creating abstract knots, and then find out that there are equivalences with mathematical knots, which this exists in the Euclidean space. So the Khipus are a 3-dimensional way of encoding information, and for me, this results in an interest that I developed for the rest of the project, because I was thinking on how to take to the 3-dimensionality these knots, because knots themselves are 3-dimensional. Some other thing that I wanted to explore, because as a study, there are some points that I want to tell is that I was based on using open source software as processing or Blender or forward. In the next slides, you will see that other specific software like Notplot. For me, this was very important because it's the ethos of the project to work with tools that are available for me and for other women who wants to experiment with technology. In the moment when I was a student, we could experiment with softwares where we need to pay, but I tried to work with Blender, even if that meant to learn in other direction, which means unlearn. If you are experienced on working with 3D, then learning Blender, it's disconnect from the structure and then connect to another structure, which was very attractive for me because precisely my project, it's about unlearn so many things: unlearn to read, unlearn to write, unlearn to code. So this was very playful for me. So this is an experiment on how to create the knots in processing, because I wanted to learn processing and I didn't want it to be intimidated by the code. So the resulting curves, I was then able to 3D printed them, and I wanted to play with the 3D printers, and I wanted to just print with different materials and prove elasticity because precisely when I show you the first slides, I was very interested on the functionality and all these physical properties. So with the next stage, then I started to think how to work, how to put words into these surfaces. And I started, I am very inspired by different authors and different books. For example, the Xenofeminist Manifesto, where I put in a software to get, like, there is this softwares where you can get mainly used in social media to get the most important words or topics that are during the day, like circulating during the day. And I got from this book the 10 most important words used as gender, labor, feminist, technologies, world, freedom, political alienation, bodies, and complexity, which with these words I felt identified. So then I started to play on how to create codes into these knots and to give sense to start to write. And you can see here is a diagram where I to make codes, like manually to assign codes, and then start to think how would I put this, for example, how do I embed words into surfaces, and for example, saying that one knot is going to contain one chapter of a book, let's say. Resulting in this, that I assign to each property of the knot, for example, color, texture, size, topology, then I translate them, give an equivalence to a word. And then I was thinking, I was following, again, the research from Gary Urton, which is where he is investigating how to translate the Khipus, how to understand the grammatics of the Khipus, because precisely the understanding of the Khipus, it is from a different structure of thinking, of language, and this classification belongs to ethnocategories of service in the Inca tribute account. And it's classifying some verbs and objects of activity that supposedly were encoded into tributarian Khipus. That said, Khipus to pay tribute. And you can see there are a list of verbs, and to the verbs corresponds objects of activity. That said, for example, nouns. And then I started creating my own list of combinatorial categories, which it means verbs related to objects of the activity. And precisely because of my feminist perspective, I started to think how to give a meaning to these knots. Let's say, for example, to make world, to make complexity, to make craft, to make history, to make tools. And this is always related to the way we are making our own histories, our own artifacts. How do we create our own tools? And I started to create a series of notes where I was playing. All this project, it's about playing with words, with the language, with the meanings. Said that you can see with these notes, I can just use a verb and a noun, for example, to say to reveal stories, to subvert structures, to generate possibilities. And then writing with notes and the design of coded surfaces. I have to quote Donna Haraway because I felt very identified with this. It matters what matters we use to think other matters with. It matters what stories we tell to tell stories with. It matters what knots, not knots, what thugs, think thugs, what descriptions describe descriptions, what ties, tie ties. It matters what stories make worlds, what worlds make stories. So because of this fictional approach I am taking, then I was also trying to create a set of knots that would be different, but they are all aligned with the idea of creating a feminist way of communicating and even a fictional language. And all these diagrams were three-dimensionalized into meshes of knots. For me, it was very important also to play with the textures of these elements, because the textures, everything in these objects is a meaning. And I wanted to create textures that were also like very attractive and fictional. So imagining that we had artifacts that we can read digitally, but not digitally with computers, but digitally with our fingers. And these are some of the results of my physical experiments. And then also trying to start create, let's say, this to intertwine words as stories. In another stage of my project, I started to play with artificial intelligence tools, GPT-2. I'm going to read this text. A Mexican feminist friend gave me the word. She called it llegar a ser, that moment of arrival when something slips into place, fits comfortably, and suddenly you just know that this is what I should be doing. The author is GPT-2, because I was also thinking, what kind of stories do I want to tell? Or who is going to tell the stories? Or like in this case, who is controlling the computer and what the computer is also saying and doing? That is why I felt attracted to play also with GPT-2. And also the teachable machine, where it's also recognizing the nodes. I am assigning values to the, meanings or words to the nodes, and these are read by machines. This is a continuation in other project, not a conversation that it's apart from this project. And I have this story. It's also another way of writing. It talks in this part, this comes the personal perspective of being a designer in another country with another language. And this text was also generated in GPT-2, was almost accurate as if a human was writing, but I changed some of the words again. Then I was thinking how to translate this text into knots, into a series of meshes. And I was creating a kind of dictionary or like tables where I was assigning meanings I was assigning words to knots by color, by direction of the knot, and by material. And this is based in this data book, Code of the Khipu data book from Marcia Asher and Robert Asher, which inspired me to create my own data book. Yeah, and this is the result. of the mesh, where the story I showed you on the beginning is encoded, and it was 3D printed. Thank you.
Very beautiful. Thank you so much, Nayeli. Then we will have our third speakers, which this time will be digitally. We'll have Leslie Garcia and Paloma Lopez, two of the members of Interspecifics. And Interspecifics is a multi-species nomad collective and independent artistic research bureau founded in Mexico City in 2013. Their current lines of research are focused on the use of sound and artificial intelligence to understand the bioelectrical and chemical signals of different living organisms and its geometrical patterns as a non-human form of communication. Their work is deeply shared by Latin American contexts where precarity enables new forms of creativity and ancient technologies meet cutting-edge forms of production, which they see as a methodology for creation, where one is always looking for the most suitable way to produce in terms of social inclusion, cross-disciplinary practices, and open knowledge. And Leslie and Paloma, I believe, also just shared a guest professorship for computer music at the TU Berlin in the last semester. And welcome to both of you. Screen sharing works, and we're very excited to hear what you have to tell us.
Thank you. Hi everyone, I am Leslie Garcia and this is Paloma Lopez.
Just 1 second, we just have to fix the audio. You're not very loud.
Okay.
Shall I turn this off? Can you try to say something?
Okay, hello, can you hear me?
Perfect, yes.
Okay, excellent. So my name is Leslie Garcia and my colleague Paloma Lopez. We're going to present on behalf of the Mexican collective Interspecifics. Maybe we can go to the next screen. And this is the collective: Carles Tardillo, Felipe Rebolledo, Alfredo Lozano, Emmanuel Anguiano. And you have the luck to have with you Maro Pebo right now. She's around there somewhere. Nick Clitwood, Paloma Lopez, and I. So today we're going to talk about the theoretical aspects of our project Codex Virtualis. And I'm also going to guide you through the technical process of the AI and their implications on today's technology. First, I want to show you Codex Virtualis is a long-run process that is divided into 4 stages. Right now, we are on the first stage, the genesis of the organisms. And we are starting the second part, which is habitat, where we try to explore external inputs and environmental conditions into the already born organisms. Then we have Codex Virtualis Emergence, which is more a real-time microscopy experiment to explore complexity on life. And finally, our dream, which is to sustain a virtual life for a long time on a virtual conditions, which is Codex Virtualis Life. So Codex Virtualis is an AI and art and science research framework for image synthesis of a taxonomic collection of a new-to-nature speculative life forms. In a way, this is our tribute to the work and life of Lynn Margules and his work on symbiogenesis, which inspires us to explore this whole process on a collective context and think about symbiosis not just as a life process, but also as a computational process and a collaborative, creative emergence that we're trying to reproduce on our work. It's an exploration of morphogenetic visual patterns that inhabit halfway the biological and the algorithmic life domains. The work as a research framework has a series of outputs. One of those are the installations. We presented the first one at Ars Electronica, then another one at Kronos Center. Maybe we can go through the installation images. Also, Kronos Center in Shanghai, the Ground Solyanka Gallery in Moscow, the A4 Museum in Chengdu, right now at the art laboratory in Berlin and Galeria Metropolitana in Mexico City. But Codex is rather the process, the publication, the booklet, the workshop is a constant understanding of ongoing collective processes that we are trying to explore. The project creates an exploration of algorithmic life, experimenting with algorithmic behaviors that are comparable to the mechanisms of life. We try to explore evolution, not from competition, but from the collaboration and exchange of biological and algorithmic systems, such as the mixed training of organs with two qualitative different datasets that merge, leading to the emergence of new visual samples analogous to the horizontal gene transfer, progressively fitting novel definitions of life. For us, in order to be capable to produce this process, first we have to explore the biological level. In this case, this level was a proposal from Maro that we start exploring some organisms from the realm of astrobiology. So for this, we try to extract some of the challenges of extreme space environments that are proposed by the SETI Institute, which were one of our partners and collaborators during the first stage of this project that was awarded with the AI residency by Ars Electronica. So we explore some of these challenges, as some of them high levels of UV, the ionization radiation, and dryness being some of the main problems. Then we created a selection of species, extremophiles, that express some specific characteristics for resilience, UV light resistance, radiation resistance, spore resistance to desiccation, and also the symbiotic interspecies survival capacities. That's the next slide, please. And from this, we extract some learnings from these organisms, which are protection, repairing, and the exchange of spores. So these are some levels of symbiosis that we want to transfer to these new organisms we are trying to create in our system. As an artificial life artistic research project, Codex Virtualis seeks to enhance our understanding of the genetic, metabolic, and behavioral processes of life by means of carefully articulating a display of scientific theories represented by a multi-layer ecosystem of interconnected collaborative computer simulation strategies. This is important because we are also thinking that the algorithms and the programs within our systems are themselves creating their own symbiotic processes. As such, this is concerned with a bottom-up scientific study of the fundamental principles of life. Honoring computer scientist Chris Longston, we seek to locating life as we know it within the larger picture of life as it could be. In the first step of Codex Virtualis, the Genesis part, the technical processes are conceptualized into three main layers, although the limiting boundaries blur as we approach the assembling and interaction of these, which are devising to perform one, which is the synthesis of biological and artificial forms of life. Two, the exploration and operation of the synthesis layer. And the third is the assemble of a display of outputs to produce that are producing layers 1 and 2. So the life form synthesis is the fundamental process in the staging the training of our StyleGAN 2, which is the generative adversarial network, a very famous and popular network that are used today in many creative and artistic proposals. We train organ networks to synthesize morphological features of our 4 datasets, such as the Naro, from the Naro Gene Bank, a public data collection from Japan, the Lenia cellular automata, which is a collection of solitons in continuous cellular automata, the AWA network, a crowdsourced collection of images, most of them from Instagram, most of them from biologists that are sharing their daily research on their microscopes, and they were very kind to share those images with us. And of course, the model organism, which is the collection of extreme condition resilient organisms inspired by the astrobiological research. We decided to use cellular automata as a representative model organism to transfer behavior to artificial forms of life. So 2 different training processes are performing this conceptual layer, which are the training of the network that is made from scratch on one of the image datasets, and the training of a network from a previously training checkpoint that we use as a transfer learning. The previous image, please. So the role of transfer learning becomes crucial in our research as we speculate for possible forms of life. In this image, you can look at a set of organisms which were generated by transfer learning of the AWA dataset into model organisms and the Lenia dataset. This means that we use the dataset of AWA or water, and we transfer the characteristics of water into the form model organisms. And you can see in the image how the systems starts to evolve and transfer those particular characteristics from the model organisms into the AWA datasets, as well as the Lenia, which for us is super important because it's the virtual organism that has the capacity, the ability to transfer behavior and some evolving references into the system. This project is an analogy that in the artificial genetic modeling, symbiotic evolution is often described by genetic fusion operators within a genotype representation level. In organ architectures, coevolution is implemented by the GANs discriminator versus generator game theoretical interplay, through which at a phenotypical level, information exchange, imitation, and deception constitutes a primordial set of inner interactions that lead to a divergent, continuously evolving representation of visual forms. It further allows us to explicitly represent an information transfer between domains, analogous to the horizontal gene transfer mechanisms in biology. So in the next images, we're gonna play 3 videos to explain a little bit about the checkpoint evolution that we are using at this point. We can play 3 of them at the same time. So in this case, it's 3 stages of a same organism in different moments. We can see a young, middle age, and a older cell evolving, even evolving limbs at the end of the process, which we find super interesting. And I'm going to explain a little bit about how we manage to remove the randomness of the latent walk of the gangs by exploring other algorithms. So here you can see some of these evolutionary processes. In the next slide, we have also the transfer of lichen into algae. Maybe we can play the next one. This. So again, 3 stages, same organism, and we can see the departure from a more algae kind of style structure into a lichen structure, and then the dissolution of the cell, born growth and death of the virtual organism in a way. Maybe we can go to the next one, the number 2, representation. So in order for us to be capable to produce these sort of evolutionary systems, maybe next one, I think is okay with the video examples. Okay, so representation, exploration, and generation of this latent work, which is the main visual feature of transformation in gangs. So to extend the generative possibilities of our trainer gangs in this layer, we are concerned with the manipulation, exploration, and control of image generating procedures. So by taking the latent space as a genetic encoding that maps into various phenotype expressions, through G projects the analogy that changes in the gene pool of a population, which is the genotype expression, produces a continuous stream of novel organism, which is the phenotype expression. In this state, an exploration of vectorial properties relative to position, direction, and magnitude of the latent space is meant to identify and represent relationships between visual attributes and the latent space region that generates them. So instead of going into a random position of different vectors in the latent space, we have to develop this tool to explore the space and find coordinates that can be interconnected and give us a more steady and stable evolution process on the virtual organism. Supervised representation and autonomous exploration become a matter of integrating computer vision, statistical, and machine learning algorithms. So this results is an in silico evolutionary architecture that further explores different algorithm recipes under which the biological concepts of variation, heredity, fusion, and cooperation can aesthetically manifest themselves and lead to in novo hybrid morphological profiles. So number 2, representation, exploration, and generation, which is the image we are seeing here. After the latent space exploration, disentanglement becomes a crucial step to enact the synthesized morphological features on the first layer. So in this figure, we can see 2 different taxonomical classes that are autonomously discovered by a clustering algorithm. Each cluster algorithm assigns each image family taxon ID or level, where organisms in the same taxon share visual characteristics such as shape, contour, color, and texture. Through this combination of latent vectors, we come to formulate a map of regions in the latent space, where configurations of similar visual features are maintained through a gamma feature. The resulting taxonomy serves as a twofold purpose. First, it allows us to get a grasp of the diversity of forms that are synthesized and emerge from interpolation of organs and learning processes to represent and generate a training image instances. Second, induces an augmented representation of morphological features that other algorithm process can integrate into generative procedures. Next image, please. So from here, we propose 2 distinct mechanisms to generate video clips and trajectories into the latent space that we call cycles, which takes as an input the sets of 2 tuples that consist of latent vectors and their assigned cluster of taxons into newly generated organisms that show an organized, uniform, and continuous behavior. The distinction between these two is interesting because class A cycles come from an autonomous algorithm that encodes evolutionary process of heredity and selection. And class B cycle comes from an algorithm that embraces human-machine collaboration by enhancing the human operator's capabilities to traverse the latent space and integrates a finite criterion. So it's similar like selecting the best species of plants in a plant house or looking for the fittest bacteria in a laboratory, but this happens in a virtual context. Now, the last layer in this computational ecosystem is concerned with the ensemble of the displays from the output of the first and second layer. So in the image, you can see a capture of a three-dimensional body, some sort of soft shell, that is done by drawing points in a 3D environment, which use the cycled video on layer 2 as a procedural texture. The process allows to abandon the two-dimensional space of the style gang and will allow us to organize and receive environmental inputs and response by reshaping this soft shell. So this is a way to create extra layer of algorithmic behavior in the gang. You can also see that on the left portion of the synthetic genome that we generated using language model training with zero-shot learning and a database of 16X and 18X ribosomal RNA sequences from model organisms. So this is an hybrid that has 50% of the DNA from the previous parents and 50% of generative network DNA. And last, you can see this organism is being tagged with scientific name that was also generated by an algorithm in this layer. Next image. Through this procedural layer, we assemble an array of ways that allows the spectator to get an immersing glimpse into the diverse possibility of forms of life in the Codex Virtualis Genesis. And in the next image, we can see the sample display, the last but not least, system of control, which allows us to select a specific organism inside the latent space. And this is also a step that is performed by another network, another kind of artificial intelligence that is in a way looking into the archive and presenting to the human spectators these different sort of cards of life that are emerging from the process. We're gonna play a little bit of a trailer because it's a little bit long, but so you can have an idea of the aesthetics. Of course, you can visit their laboratory and have a better experience. I think we can stop there. So the project belongs to a cultural and artistic history of automatas. Humanity's age-old quest for mechanical life and its contemporary redemptions in the field of artificial life, e-life, as computational simulations. It also focuses on values of collaborations and exchange in the quest for diversity and survival, both in algorithms as in microbial life. When it comes to the field of artificial intelligence, the integration of neural networks, computer vision mechanisms, and traditional machine learning algorithms into a semantic coupling that seeks to represent symbiotic relationships promotes a neo-animistic conception that is proposed to antagonize the widespread mechanization conception of AI that imitates and somehow preserves the alienated mechanization of human labor and capitalist societies. This neo-animistic conception considers that through a positioning of distributed agency, we can picture AI as a free-form and assumed intelligence based on a human measure, as well as seeing machine intelligence as an agentic entity of another order, capable of subjectivity other than that of humans. And this is our project. I want to thank Maro, Pebo, and Alfredo Lozano for putting together this presentation. I want to thank also Paloma López for being on charge of the research process of this project, and of course the whole team. And thank you everyone for having us virtually. We really want to be there at some point. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And yes, we look forward to next time, hopefully live. So a last but not least of our speakers today is a third member of Interspecifics, is Maro Pebo, who is an artist and art historian whose work aims to release the indiscipline of living cells. Maro is born in Mexico City, has a PhD in creative media from the City University of Hong Kong, and an MA in critical and gender studies from Bologna University. Weaving collaborations, Maro works on defying anthropocentrism and on skeptical environmental accountability. Her transdisciplinary work complements and transforms the responsibility of the life sciences to think about biological matter. She's also been involved a lot in Bach Society, for instance, and we're very, very happy to have Maro here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for enduring this long day. We heard a lot of words, we heard a lot of concepts already. So I would try to be short and sweet and entertaining as much as I can to keep your energy for this moment. I really don't like to be behind this, but I'll try to be obedient. What I want to present today is the feminist traditions behind cyborg kingship in art. What I'm trying to say, today we heard, and we are all in this audience very familiar with notions of symbiosis, right? Or endosymbiosis, or the non-human, the post-human turn, non-human subjectivities. Everyone in this audience is very familiar with them, but what I want to think today is the importance of acknowledging what is the origin of these ideas. And not only what is the feminist origin of these ideas, today I'm gonna focus on the Cyborg Manifesto that is familiar to us, but maybe these ideas are also a good starting point of orientation to think about all of these new works that we are developing with trans-species thinking and symbiosis thinking, and we can orient them to contain and to preserve their political potential. So this is what I want to present to you today. So as I said before, and today, all day, we have been looking at moist media works that establish these interspecies relations. Right now, we have an environmental urgency that makes it that so many works are working with these notions, with these concepts of this post-anthropocentric turn that we all have been thinking. So my proposal and the center of my idea that I want to test with you today is the idea that these artworks that we are constructing and we're dealing with embody the Cyborg Manifesto. So Donna Haraway wrote this radical manifesto in 1985. And what she's proposing is that the cyborg is a myth. You know, she's constructing it a myth that later derives in the idea of these science frictions, but it's also a metaphor. But the metaphor then becomes a figuration that will be embodied in the works that we are developing from art and biology. And what she's proposing in the Cyborg Manifesto is a set of tools to overturn existing domain structures. This is exactly the political dimension that I would like to recover and to sustain later with the works in the present. So she's talking about race, she's talking about class, and she's talking about social realities. She's not just talking about the beauty of the fungi being friends with the cyanobacteria, but there's all of these other implications that are very present and powerful in the Cyborg Manifesto. So there is a joint kinship with animals and machines that belongs to this traditional of potential of action. So I have seen what I have said. There's two main ideas from the Cyborg Manifesto that I think we need to acknowledge and that we could work with, which is art that embodies this organism-machine continuum. Again, this is something we super take for granted, right? But in the 85, Haraway is talking about how to dissolve dualisms, which has become like something that we work with every day. And the most important dualisms are these ideas of culture and nature, you know, this idea of the artificial, or when we say, oh, we want to, I don't know, save nature, you know, we're completely solving this notion of nature between what is biological, what's technological, and what is me and what is the other, which is also something very important for everyone who's working with microorganisms, for example. And what this continuum from the Cyborg Manifesto also refers to is this deep endosymbiotic relation. We are thinking, for example, in moist media, which is a mixture. This is a concept as described by Roy Ascott. She's thinking about something that is simultaneously hardware, is algorithm, and living cells, right? So a little bit what we have seen with Interspecifics, what they're working with. We are working with. Embody. And the second concept that comes from the Cyborg Manifesto that we should acknowledge, but also work with for the future, is embodying the post-anthropocentric turn. All right, so I take for granted that everyone here knows what the post-anthropocentric turn is. And just in case one person is not, I'm going to quote my favorite philosopher, Rosie Braidotti, that she says we're thinking about a process of confronting the thinkability of life that doesn't have me or any other human at the center. And this is very sobering. It's an instructive process, and this post-anthropocentric shift is a start for an ethics of sustainability. So those who were in my workshop a couple of weeks ago, we were thinking, how can we have an ethics of sustainability that is critical, you know, that we're not naive, because we need to move beyond naiveness in this process, and how can we have like a critical ethics of sustainability? So when we're thinking about embodying the post-anthropocentric turn that the Cyborg Manifesto was already proposing in 85, we can think about the notion of making kin. How can we make kin in terms as Haraway presents it? But also it is understood as feminist posthumanism from Rosie Braidotti. And I think for me, the key of it is the politics of affinity and accountability in affectionate ties. How do we build affectionate ties with each other, with all the others, with all possible others? And for me, the key is there in this affectionate affinity and accountability. And what Haraway is proposing is this renewed kinship system, right? So this is radicalized by concretely affectionate ties to the non-human others. My favorite, the microbes. So we're thinking, when we're thinking about these artworks, about these speculative fabulations. We are dreaming of the connection. We are dreaming of the possibility of being with each other, but this is grounded by the biotechnological materiality. So our artworks are not science fiction, because in our artworks, really, you know, the process, metabolic process of fermentation is warming up the bioreactor, for example, in the work of Oron that he showed us earlier. So we're really limited by the materiality. If it doesn't warm up enough, you know, the bioreactor is not going to be able to have the cells, keep the cells alive. So our fabulations, our fictions are bounded and grounded on the materiality of the things that we're working with. So we are thinking with the machine, and we're thinking with my biological matter. This is a different process of thinking with the object itself. I brought some examples, but today we have seen so many artworks that I don't know if it makes sense anymore. Gilberto Esparza, Mexican artist. And the only thing I'm going to tell you about this wonderful artwork, besides hear it, it sounds beautiful, I brought examples of works that have sound because we are in the Sonic Cyborg panel mainly, and that's the reason. But I wanted to speak about microbial fuel cells as a form of cyborg endosymbiosis, because in them, bacteria are releasing electrons and they're exchanging with the cell, with the machine as some sort of mitochondria, right? And this is the kind of electrons that are being collected by devices as Biosonot by Gilberto Esparza. And he's collected this data and other data from polluted waters to offer this auditory experience of the levels of pollution in the water. A similar beautiful artwork is this one by Sabine Ann, and she's using Winogradsky columns as microbial fuel cells simultaneously. These are concepts, and I said we already had enough words for today, but the principle is similar. We have a hybrid of software, hardware, and in this case, it's mostly hardware and biological elements. So we are constructing our own sonic cyborgs as examples. And the third and last example is speculative communications, which has a lot of levels, but the main level is having a machine vision, observing the microorganisms and collecting the information from them as a source for sound production, and also for having the experience of living through the structures the microorganisms establish. So this is, of course, one of my favorite cyborg expressions. So what I wanted to say is that these artworks and other artworks that we have been through their sonic dimension, they embody the desire for endosymbiotic ways of living. So this is what we were talking about before, right? So we have a desire for a future of kinship. And these artworks are really giving the flesh to something that Haraway was only dreaming in '85. She says, like, this is like fiction, I don't know. And then all of a sudden we are really giving flesh to these ideas. And the relation to these fundamental texts is an effort to acknowledge these feminist traditions. And of course, in these two main, especially in these two main points, in the nature culture continuum and in these non-human subjectivities. So we don't forget, like, who, I mean, among other authors, who was thinking about it earlier on. And finally, I would like to say that is, of course, a motivation for us, an orientation not to lose the potential of action. Thank you.
Thank you, Maro. Stay. Can we have all the speakers from this panel back on stage? And exactly, can we have Leslie and Paloma pinned? So this is our first hybrid live digital panel today. And therefore, I'm just ask Leslie and Paloma to just unmute and shout out. So that we're looking at the people in the audience, the screen, the real life, and so on. And we're missing one panelist, Constanza. Okay, maybe we grab her when she comes back. So maybe first of all, I would ask the other panelists to respond to Maro's hypothesis. I love that you bring back Donna Haraway, because I can't let it go either since 1985, and I was born in '83, and it keeps coming back, and every time you read it, it's got new relevance. But is it true? Have we embodied the vision, or is that romanticizing? Are we overestimating ourselves? Is she overestimating us? And if so, what are possibly the next steps? Is there anyone that might like to respond to that? Okay, then I'm going to just throw the ball, first of all, to Leslie.
Oh, my God. Okay. I don't know. I think Donna for us has been not just an inspiration, but some sort of like a guide into what is possible to produce in terms of art and I believe it's very interesting the time we're living, because we can go beyond the fiction. We can now produce actual reality based on these ideas. And this is for us super powerful, because we can take the inspiration of living with others, understanding reality through the senses and the perception of other organisms, other interpretations, agencies, and subdivisions into real life context. And 9 years of the existence of the collective, Donna has been important, as well as Rosie, as well as Pickering, and all these new materialism thinkers that are empowering our imaginations, but also for us, the importance of retaking the space of the Latin American ancestral traditions in the same level of importance as these Western ideas. So we are sort of trying to put those philosophical levels into the same area, and I think Donna is empowering us to do that.
Thank you. I think that's a very good point, and nothing against Donna, really, with all my heart. But I do think that what Bredotti, for instance, brings in more is this sort of beyond Western-centric perspectives that Donna Haraway was not as confronted with as a discourse at that time. Nayeli, would you like to share also had a quote from Donna Haraway in your presentation?
Yeah, for me, it's like very inspiring, the part of fabulations. I remember once I was listening, she was giving a talk, and I was listening the way she was talking and telling like these fictional stories. And I was thinking that I also want to do with the others, like my project is made to do with others. And thanks to this project, I have been getting to know, especially Black women and women of color, taking the tools and transforming them and subvert them and use them for us. And I think for me, it was very interesting to like, as the quote said, like, it matters what stories, who is telling the stories. It matters a lot for us. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, and maybe one thing just to add to that, the beautiful thing about Donna Haraway's figurations, I think, is that she's always disregarding them herself. So she's always moving on and making new figurations and critiquing her own figurations. And so probably in that point, before we romanticize them, maybe we have to think, what would it be? We have to confront ourselves and say, what would be the next figurations that would help us sort of develop our thinking? What's the next figuration then, Maro?
I mean, of course, right now we're very thinking about the notion of trans species, like the transness is right now like where we're dreaming, and how to accomplish it materially, just not like speculative. And we are, of course, discovering a lot of organisms that are mixed, and of course, also like biologically understanding the like a grayscale and stop in taxonomical divisions, because we're actually, you know, organisms in flow instead. I think maybe through that we can start thinking.
Yeah, and maybe also I think what Nayeli and Constanza both brought up, the looking also sometimes back at pre-colonial knowledges and systems, ways of you reacted, that's good, so you can counter me. But you know, also when it comes to potential digital computing, I mean, right now movements like ethno-computing or indigenous computing and all of these things, it's creating at least a discussion space to think, can we radically change the base of computing by sometimes looking at entirely different logics that might get us out of the binary that we so love to recreate digitally and in lived materialized realities. I like the reaction.
I mean, I am for sure biased, but in the work of Interspecifics, there's like a high regard to also thinking other indigenous approaches. You know, that's where we're thinking in terms of a codex, and also thinking about non-human intelligence. So works before I joined them, so it's not so biased. They have several works that are really reflecting on the notion of non-human intelligences, not only in terms of artificial intelligence, but also in terms of the intelligence of microorganisms. So how do microorganisms organize? How do microorganisms communicate? And of course, we are doing a huge effort of like trying to find our own local indigenous cosmovisions, and this relates for us in terms of the animism. So how do we think of the algorithm as a living entity, but also of the hardware that we're working with as like a living entity? So it's somehow thinking ancient thinking to move into the future, to imagine our new figurations.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful point. And also, I think a lot of the values that you brought up in your talk of kinship and care and affection. And there is, of course, right now, the feminist new materialist discourses of care, and they're also very important, but I think there are also other concepts of kinship and care, for instance, from Amazonian cosmologies, which would also expand that discussion of care, a discussion that's also been capitalized very quickly and turned into a whole new product series, which we can now consume. But to look at these, you know, other forms of ideas of care, which are also beyond Western ideas of care. Do we have questions, comments from the audience? Yes, please. I have to ask you to come up to the microphone for the streaming and recording.
Hello, me again. Thank you so much for a super inspiring presentation, panel-wise. First of all, I want to say it really resonates with New Zealand because equally, walking into the future, looking backwards is something that is underlying the entire culture and way of understanding your own identity in that culture. And of course, I am not of that culture, but I've been teaching craft and contemporary craft in New Zealand for 25 years now. So what really resonated with me in this panel is when we're talking about ideas, what really came forward was the learning through the haptic and the touch, looking at knots and understanding a khipu by making one. And also I'm imagining by the algorithmic interspecies, it is extremely different for the audience looking at the imagery to the creators that are actually somewhat more haptically engaged in the making. And I'm really liking to hear from all of you the knowledge and the, you know, when we're talking about knowledge and life forms and reproduction, and how do we access knowledge that might be lost, and how important the haptic is, and which is also in the feminist discourse. Thank you.
Anyone? Importance of haptic crafts?
My expert in haptics is over there. So.
In my project, like involving like this texture and the fact that it is important to connect with all the senses to the piece, it is also related to what I'm like trying to look in the past and how all the senses were involved to understand and to be connected. And I think with the Khipu, which is a multidimensional way of communication, which now we because of the way we are changing our perspectives, that we communicate in so few characters and we continue like evolving so fast. I think that with the 3D printed pieces, I wanted to bring this factor that it's precisely involving all the senses. Yeah, for me, it was very important with this project to also take a look in the past and deconstruct myself, because I am constructed in a way where I learn under some systems, under colonial systems of understanding my reality. So with this project, I really struggle to understand other perspectives, because I discovered myself making some mistakes, like getting biased by some information. And I think, like, all in all, like the project, like being digital, being physical, helped me to open my mind. I wouldn't say that I'm totally deconstructed, but yeah, that's something I really wanted to point out. I am not an indigenous person. I'm coming from Latin America, but I am, how to say, broken somehow, overturned by this history where I come from. So for me, it was also important to make a review, not a romanticize the past. That's also important in my project. I don't want to romanticize. I don't want to romanticize cultures. I don't want to romanticize the indigenous perspectives as well. Yeah.
Do you want to add?
Paloma or Leslie, ¿quieren decir algo? I'm sorry, do you want to say something about it? I'm sorry. You want to mention something about touch? No, you're good? No.
Go ahead, go ahead.
No, I'm good.
Well, I think I can say about haptics of working on the biolabs, for example. Importance of, when you're on space collecting soil and getting your hands dirty, and then the whole process of extraction of bacteria, like all these spaces are super important. But at the end, and in our practice, we are sort of like creating an alternative reality for those organisms, which is the problem of science. Like you don't have a real space of observation. You have a synthetic space of observation and haptics. So everything becomes hyper clean, hyper specialized, hyper synthetic, and then that's in a way like connecting those organisms into a sort of matrix of human condition and observation. But I think it's important that before we got into all these ideas of recreating symbiotic processes, we spend a lot of time on the laboratory working with bacteria, trying to understand the ways, and also with other organisms like slime mold. And it was very interesting for me, the transitions of going between nature into the lab, and how these transitions disconnects you from the ecosystemic into the specific, and the relation that this action has in the way that contemporary science is expressing itself into the politics and logics of control of economical and capitalistic world.
Thank you. Do you have, yes, Chris? Chris has questions from the online.
Yeah, from the online
audience.
live chat from YouTube. First, Taiko Nomiya versus a comment said every single concept in Maro Pebo's presentation opens up so many interesting avenues to explore. Thank you very much. And then she also asked the question, where did the inspiration come from Maro to use biology to explain and illustrate social phenomena?
Okay, thank you. I don't completely agree with the idea of using biology to illustrate something, but rather I would think that we are biology, right? So how do we understand the processes that we are embedded in? A little bit breaking this idea of our, artificialness or our humanness. How do we relate? I would never want to use biology to justify anything that we're doing, but rather to understand ourselves completely embedded in these sets of relationships, and how these hormones make us do what we do, and our relationships to everything. And also to take responsibility. Sometimes we want to justify the things that we do because we're, this animal or this thing, but rather it's the other way around. This physicality and this body makes us and allows us to take responsibility, this affectionate responsibility, right? So I think more than using biology as a justification or figuration to understanding what is happening socially, is like completely understanding ourselves as biological bodies, and that from that place of care, and we take responsibility as well. But thank you very much for the question.
Do we have any last questions? Yes, please.
I may ask Leslie to maybe help me explain the setup for their recording for the bacteria developed on the culture, like kind of what equipment they use for taking the video, and how long usually you measure this experiment. I know it's very detailed, but I'm so very interested in this AI things like applied to the taxonomic. Thank you.
Yeah, well, actually, the source material is the data sets are pictures of microorganisms. They're static. So the process is what I love about artificial intelligence. So to understand your question, I have to explain the difference in between programmatic coding and artificial intelligent processes, which is, if I want to program an animation of a bacteria, I have to tell my program from the beginning to the end what's the supposed behavior I want to create. In the case of artificial intelligence, we are teaching with examples to a machine how something looks like. And we sort of created companion softwares for the artificial intelligence in order to take the intelligence into a further process of development. So they just extract the characterization of the microorganisms is observing, and then the companion software helps the artificial intelligence to articulate movement, behavior, growth, and things get into a much more interesting outcome than just having the artificial intelligence alone producing by themselves what is interpreted as microorganisms. So that's why we're into the realm of morphological aspects, because it's about how microorganisms look and how they behave and how they can behave in a virtual environment. But for us, in order to do that, we have to create this ecosystem of algorithms where the artificial intelligence is the central system that generates expressions of complexity, and then we have these other companion systems that are in charge of, for example, organizing taxonomical orders, exploring the space to find characterizations similar to growth or cellular division, for example. That is something that happens inside the system. And then we have other softwares that help those to, for example, create animations and then produce the videos. And then we have other ones that produce the three-dimensional aspects. And of course, in all this process, the let's say the thread that intertwines the process is our human perception of what these symbiotic relationships are. So for us, this artificial intelligence is also collaborator and part in an agency and a way of expression that is very important for this process at this point.
Thank you, Leslie. Okay, any last questions? No, then I would say thank you so much to the speakers of the panel. And then for the last little few minutes, I would ask some of my colleagues to come up and join me to round up a little bit today, the discussions. And I think rather than summarizing or rounding up, also a little bit thinking about what we can take on from the panels today. Sorry, Linus is saying to me I should go in here. What we can take with us tomorrow to discuss further on the second conference day. So perhaps we want to share some reflections on the three panels and we fit. Look at that. We have a wide lens. Anyone that would like to start?
Yeah, first of all, let me just go somewhere here. Oh, hang on, even closer. We see more than you see here. First of all, we want to thank the audience, the on-site audience here, to bear with us for 3 long, complex panels and a lab tour and many conversations. And also we want to thank the online audience to bear with us and to put questions and to comment. Summing up a whole conference day is always a weird conundrum, so we would not even wanted to start with it, but there are some ideas, and I see already a lot of interesting entanglements and references and cross-references from speakers from even different panels to one another. So maybe what we could take with us into the evening and sleep over and dream of and then modulate it and come back tomorrow again and walk them through is at least what I could actually take on my evening journey. I guess what encompasses all contributions is thinking and living and researching through processes, through time and space, and the phenomenon of living systems, and as very much embracing a non-anthropocentric perspective by doing so. And what I think is also encompassing is somehow metabolic systems, is from a philosophical point of view, either be it from an anthropological point of view, being from an artistic point of view, a performative point of view, be it for a biosystemic point of view, being from a deconstructive point of view. I think this was really encompassing for most of us presenting today. I think there was a lot of speakers acknowledging going back into old knowledges. That was really remarkable for all of us. Going, be it pre-colonial knowledges or anti-wisdom or ancestral knowledge or knowledge going back into older generations, or actually very, very much back into ancient times. That appreciation and that openness was really remarkable today. And in several panels, we could see that. Not only Rice Brewing Sisters and Oran were pointing this out, but I think also Constanza and Nayeli in the last panel was particularly outspoken for that approach. So actually just bringing knots and knots and relations and connections to different contributions. Maybe we could also say that social fermentation, as we started our projects, the 4 of us, now conferring the 6 of us and even all of us here, I think in starting with Rice Brewing Sisters, I think there was also a red thread that went through basically maybe metaphorically or indirectly or intentionally to most of these presentations today, fermenting. And maybe tomorrow on our walks, as we all invite you also still to come along with us, elasticity is probably a term that we, dear sisters, that we will pick up tomorrow and elaborate further on. Then the viral performance by Peiying is something with the viral human cohabitation is something also from the pandemic point of view, backwards, is something that we definitely will continue to discuss. And of course, around the biotechnological, biotech criticism is something that I would really like to invite us all to pick up tomorrow on our walks. Maybe we can actually bring big criticism into our discussions tomorrow when we walk along the river, maybe. Let's keep this to the river. And and thinking about biotech hypocrisies and deconstructing them is something that we probably should continue tomorrow. What I really liked from Sename's presentation, and we can also pick this up in our discussion tomorrow, is the idea of cosmogeny and also learning from the Lily people and learning from looking backwards. And then again, symbiogenesis was tangled and touched by several perspectives. Kamak talked about her project of the Hollow Beyond, and Maro also turned and stressed the symbiogenesis aspect. And maybe also we could encompass the symbiosis, endosymbiosis, all these terms that were several times mentioned. Maybe you can end with, I mean, never end, but maybe my little contribution I'd like to end now is, I liked, Nayeli, how you said, it's all to reconsider, consider and in brackets, reconsider language and communication. Because as much as we want to become non-human, or as much as we want to step out of our anthropocentric view as humans, we just cannot. And even here in the conference, we talk and stumble with language. So maybe I like this, Nayeli, how you said, we have to reconsider maybe, and as you said, very impressive, we have to maybe create our own systems and languages. So maybe this is something I take home with, and I'd like to pick it up tomorrow. So my hand over.
No, I hardly can add anything. Thank you for your wonderful words. I also had the feeling, I'm a bit torn, like it started so dramatically, you know, from Australia, and then so much hope from the rice brewing sisters. And I think throughout the day, I feel like that's in the world we're living in. And I thought, oh my God, no, we can't not change anything. And yes, we can. So I think that constantly. Yeah, I would like to thank you again all for joining virtually and in presence. I think it's so nice to see one another again.
Thank you so much, Michelle, Florian, and the colleagues for hosting us today. That was so heartwarming, and thank you so much. It was a beautiful surrounding. I can also repeat what the audience told me in the breaks, that it was a really, really pleasant space and atmosphere to confer, to come together and to mingle. So thank you so much.